guys, welcome to the channel or welcome back to the channel. So today it's not going to be our general content. This is going to be a story time, and it's kind of a crazy one. I'm going to talk about the time when I was 18. I'm going to talk about my car accident and getting hit by a car when I was 18. And the reason I'm filming this is for a couple reasons. The story actually came up in the part one of the questions that we did as a married couple. If you guys saw that video, there was a question about what is your deepest fears, and I answered to Sam, and I said that my deepest fear was to lose like a main family member, like a child or him, a husband, like a spouse, like that. But I talked about a little bit about that I used to have a fear of dying young or of things like that, and that came from this experience. And I mentioned that I got hit by a car when I was 18, and I know some of you were interested in the story time. So I decided that I am going to share it. And I also think that it might be able to help someone who's maybe going through a near-death experience or a tragedy or something that they're carrying with them. It might help someone. So you never know who you help when you share things. So I'm just going to share the story time, but I do want to put a trigger warning. If you have a lot of trauma or you're very triggered by like car accidents and things like that, near-death experiences, if you're really triggered, I don't want to trigger anyone's anxiety or mental health. So if you don't think you could handle the video because it was a near-death experience, it was, I was okay, but it was a traumatic experience that I'm going to be sharing. If it's a little too much for you and you don't think this video is good for you and you think it's bad for your mental health or going to trigger you in any way, click off the video and I'll see you in the next one. But for those of you that were interested in the story, so I'm going to try to kind of go back to the day and tell you the whole story. So this happened when I was 18, almost 19. I was a freshman in college, and this was actually my first semester of college, and it was the end of my first semester. It was actually like right before finals week. I was ending my first semester in college, and everything was fine. And actually, guys, if you saw our other video, like how we met and stuff, I do say that I met Sam in college, but in fact, I didn't know him at the time. I met him the following semester after this, so he's not in the story. He had no reaction to me getting hit by the car because we weren't even friends at that point. I didn't know him. I met him literally the semester after I got hit by the car. He does know the story, but he wasn't in my life when it happened, or when it actually happened. But there are a few people that are relevant to the story. So, like I said, I was 18, almost 19, a freshman in college, just ending my freshman year. And I actually went to school that day. I was in Borough Manhattan Community College. I went to school that day. I went to all my classes. It was a normal day. It was December. It was literally the beginning of December, so right before Christmas. Not right before Christmas. It was literally the beginning of December, December 5th to be exact. And I went to class like a normal day. It was a pretty cold day, but it was no snow, no sleet, nothing on the ground, nothing like that. Clear day, but cold day, normal day in New York. And then I left school early because I had a dentist appointment, and I took the train back to where I lived at the time. So I was going to Borough Manhattan Community College, and I lived in the Bronx. I'm not going to say where, but it did happen near my home at the time. So I went back to my home and I got ready for my dentist appointment. And at the time, my dentist, me and my mom had the same dentist, and so we used to make our appointments together, and basically we used to go together, right? So my mom was still at work and I was getting ready for my dentist appointment, and I was on the phone with one of my best friends, and I was just in the house, fixing my makeup, changing my clothes, that kind of thing, and just talking to my best friend. And I don't even remember what we were talking about, but we were just talking, catching up or whatever. And then I was like, oh, I have to go to this dentist appointment. I put on my coat. I took the elevator downstairs, and then as I took the elevator, I always remember this, guys, this specific detail that I'm about to share, because I always think like, wow, that could have changed everything. If this never happened, would this whole accident have even happened? So I literally put on my coat, got my bag, was still on the phone with my best friend, got in the elevator, and went all the way downstairs. And then I told my best friend, oh my God, I forgot my scarf. I'm not wearing my scarf. And she said, oh, you forgot it. And I'm like, no, it's really cold. Let me just go back upstairs. So split second, right? that like switched it by like a minute and something, or probably about 2 minutes. And if I would have just walked outside, this probably would have never happened, which is crazy. So I actually didn't even get out the elevator. I was literally still on the phone with her like, oh, I forgot my scarf. I'm not wearing my scarf. It's so cold. And I'm going to go back upstairs. So I didn't even get out the elevator. I clicked the button back to go back up. I went back up. I opened my door. I walked in the apartment. I got the scarf that was like on the couch that I had forgot. Took my jacket off, put it back on, put the jacket back on, and closed the door again, went back down in the elevator. And the way that my mom's apartment is, there's a big intersection. It's a 4-way intersection. It's a pretty dangerous street. Other people have been hit before. There's been accidents. It's a pretty dangerous street. So we're always careful when we cross. And I was being careful. If you listen to the story, you will see like exactly what happened. So it's a 4-way. So basically what I was doing, I was going to pick up my mom from her job so that we could go to the dentist together. And so in order to do that, I had to cross over. I crossed over the first side of the intersection. So if you guys are not from New York, it's a 4-way intersection. So there's cars going both ways, and then there's like, it's a very busy street as well. And it's actually right across the street from a hospital and a church. So it's like ambulances, there's a lot of traffic. So I got off the phone with my best friend. I was like, okay, I'm going to my dentist. I remember I clicked off the phone and I put my phone in my pocket, but I thought I clicked off the phone, but I didn't click it off. I just like said bye, and then I guess I had a lot in my hand, and so I just put it in my pocket, and it was still on. And so she ended up hearing the whole thing because I crossed the first street and everything was fine. And then when I went to cross over to where the block where my mom's job would have been, so if I would have crossed the street, I would have kept going down and then picked up my mom. It was just like 2 blocks, literally. They always say they always say that you have more of a chance of an accident happening near your home than when you're far away, and this is an example of that. So I crossed the first intersection. I put the phone away. I crossed the first intersection, and you know, I thought that that my best friend wasn't, you know, hearing anything, but I think she thought like I pocket dialed her again when she heard everything, and I'll get into it. So when I crossed the second intersection, I went to cross the second intersection. I remember the light turned, like the little walk guy, you know, the light was in my favor to walk, and there was like a few people near me, but I think I was in the so like if you're crossing the street with a group of people in New York, like you're crossing as a group, but like I think I was a little bit ahead. There was like a guy like a few inches in front of me, there was somebody behind me, and then I was kind of in the middle. And I think I took like maybe 2 or 3 steps into the street, and I didn't see the car or anything like that, but I heard, like as I was walking, I heard the car like speeding. And I don't know, guys, I think this was like instinct, survival or whatever, but I like when I heard the car, I knew I was gonna get hit, and I knew there was nothing I could do to prevent it. Like there was no time to jump back, there was no time to jump forward, there was no time to think. It was like a split second. I heard like I heard like someone really speeding, and I knew that I was in the path and I knew that they were gonna probably run the light, like they were speeding. So even though I had the right of way and I was walking, like there was a moment, it was so quick, but I knew I was gonna get hit, and it's like I braced my body for it. I didn't even look, I didn't turn, and thank God I didn't turn, because if I would have turned, I think that would have been more like my abdomen area, and that's more trauma, right? So I'm walking this way, I'm walking this way, let's say this is me, I'm walking this way, the car is coming this way, and I knew I was gonna get hit at that point. There was nothing I could do. I just kind of braced my body for it, and the car hit me. I think the police report said about 60 or 70 miles per hour. Remember, this is in a church and a school zone, and this is when the pedestrians had the right of way, and the driver ran the light and was speeding, and I got hit. And when I got hit on like the side, like I guess your mostly my hip, I think took, like my left hip, I think took the brunt of that, but also like the side of my abdomen, but not the front. But then I I'm trying to remember exactly like the order that this happened. There was a lot of witnesses, so like my building was literally right across the street, so there was people that knew me, like my neighbors and stuff, hanging out outside. There were people from the hospital like on their break. There was a lot of people, so the witnesses that I have spoken to, they might say it a little bit different, but this is obviously from my perspective, so I didn't see it. Like, I didn't see it with my own eyes, kind of. I more I can't even say I felt it, because to be honest, guys, it sounds crazy, but I didn't feel anything when the car hit me. I don't know if that's like your body going into shock, flight or flight, or some type of survival mechanism, but I honestly didn't. Sorry. So it hit me on my left side, but crazy enough, I ended up like getting tossed in the air, and what I remember is completely being tossed in the air, like doing a 360. And the way we know that that happened is because I was hit on the left side, but all my injuries were on the right side of my body, which is crazy. And when I landed, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this is when my head hit the windshield like 2 or 3 times, and then I landed off the car, or onto the floor. Honestly, guys, this is gonna sound crazy and completely supernatural, but I do believe that, you know, God was protecting me that day. I do believe tons of angels were protecting me that day, and I honestly, for multiple reasons that I'm gonna share in this video, I have an aunt that had passed away maybe 3 or 4 years before this incident, and I did feel her presence with me, and I do believe that she protected me as well. And so and the reason I say like this part is kind of murky for me, I never passed out or anything, but this part is kind of murky because this is where like the supernatural component comes in, and believe me or not, but this is what happened. I never felt my back land on the ground. So if you get hit by a car and you flip upside down basically and hit the windshield and go onto the floor, you would think that your back would be severely impacted, and you would think you would feel yourself like slam onto the concrete, like especially a concrete floor from so high up, and from trauma. You would feel pain, you would probably pass out, maybe, you would have severe back injuries, possibly. I had none of that, and I did not feel myself land on the ground. I knew I got hit, I knew I tumbled like upside down in the air, I knew that my head hit the windshield, but when I hit the floor, I didn't hit the floor, or I never felt it. I felt someone wrap around me and kind of put me on the floor, and I believe that that was an angel or a guardian or something of that nature, because I never felt myself land on the floor, and that is, how is that possible? Like, there's no explanation for that one. And then also, like, I did not have severe back injuries except for a few bruises on my right shoulder side, but nothing of what you would have thought I would have from that fall. So it doesn't make sense. But basically that's what happened. I got hit, I flipped, and then hit the windshield, fell onto the ground. And then like I said, my neighbors were there, people that knew, people from the hospital, things like that. And I remember I told you I was on the phone with my best friend, and then this happened. So I didn't know that the phone was still on in my pocket, and she heard everything. So she just heard like some crash, some craziness, and she didn't know. And so she's calling me back to back to back. But when I flipped, my phone flew to the other side of the street. And so people that knew me from the building came running like, oh my God, that's the girl from so-and-so's apartment, and you know, whatever. And they knew me. And then people from the hospital, like a nurse that was on break, she came running over. One of my neighbors came running, like a few of my neighbors, maybe 2 or 3, came running over. And one of the guys was like, oh, I know her. She lives with her mom and right there, blah, blah, blah. And you know, the nurse was asking me questions like, do you know where you are? Do you know your name? That kind of thing. And I was awake, and I knew what happened, but I was like in a bit of a shock, but I was alert. I could talk and everything was fine relatively. And so my best friend on the other end is like calling me back to back to back, but I don't know that because my phone had flew. And I'm saying to everyone, I need to call my mom. I need to call my mom. And they're like, where's your phone? Where's your phone? And now I don't know where my phone is. And someone in the chaos finds the phone on the other side of the street. They're like, is this your phone? And I'm like, yeah. And they ask me, what's the number? What's the number? And I tell them my mom's job number, and they dialed it for me. And then they gave me the phone. And I tell my mom, I got hit by a car. I'm on this street. Come. And she ran out of work, obviously, freaked out, not knowing how bad things were, and got there. But while I was on the phone with my mom, I'm like, Mom, I got hit by a car. Then I hear a beeping. And guys, I didn't mean to do this to one of my closest friends. I didn't mean to like traumatize her. But in the moment, it was just happening so fast, and I wasn't all there, and you know, I just got hit by a car. So she's calling because now she heard all of this commotion and she has no idea what happened, but she's like, oh my God, what happened? I heard something crazy. So I'm seeing her call, and I'm like, oh my God, like she's calling me. So I'm like, what the hell? So I click over and I'm like, I got hit by a car, I'll call you back. And I clicked off. So she's there. She said she was on the bus. She's there having like a panic attack and calling my other best friends, and now like they're worried or whatever. But now what I'm going through on that, and I'm just on the floor, like nobody's moving me. The nurse is telling everybody don't move her, right? And the lady that hit me, honestly, she tried to leave. She tried to leave the scene like a hit and run, but thank God the people that were there knew me, and there was enough of them that they kind of stopped her and said, you're not going anywhere. And she was kind of just on the sideline having like her own panic attack. And I'm gonna be 100% honest, I had no sympathy in that moment because you just hit me with your car and I don't even know if I'm okay. And she was like having her own panic attack, and I was just like, okay. I wasn't even worried about her. And then I just stood on the floor, and the nurse kept asking me questions, I guess like keeping me alert. My mom got there. Somebody called 911. One of the neighbors, somebody there called 911. I didn't call 911. I was on the floor. And honestly, nothing hurt. Everything kind of felt numb. And from what the doctors have told me and ENT told me, like that I wasn't in like complete shock to where like I was unresponsive or like total shock, but my body went into like a survival mode where it was protecting me, and so it wasn't feeling pain and it was like numb. So that was kind of weird. And so my mom gets there within a few minutes and she's freaked out, and the ENTs get there. Remember, I'm right across the street from the hospital, so literally the ambulance didn't even like pull out and actually come. They just brought the gurney and rolled it across the street. And the two ENTs, they checked me out. They put a light in my eyes. They were like asking me questions as well. They asked me if anything hurt, and at that moment it didn't. And then they did like where I guess they checked to see if you're like paralyzed or anything. They asked me to move my toes. And I remember I thought I was paralyzed because he asked me to move my toes and I didn't feel myself moving my toes. But I was moving my toes, and I asked him, I'm like, am I moving my toes? And he's like, yeah, you're moving your toes. Can you not feel it? And I said, no, I can't feel it. And he said, oh, well, sometimes when you're in shock, your body will kind of be numb, but it'll come back. It'll come back because you can move your toes. You're not paralyzed or anything. So so then they put me on the stretcher. My mom's with me now, and we get rolled into the ER. Literally, it was like a scene from Grey's Anatomy, as of what I remember. Like, I'm just seeing everything above me now because I'm laying on the stretcher, so I'm seeing the sky. They rolled me across the street, and then they roll me into the ER, like trauma, I don't even know. And I'm seeing the lights and people like flashing, and I just remember like the EMTs there, and then I remember like a swarm of doctors and nurses running in and hooking me up to all kinds of stuff. And my mom's there, and she's kind of freaking out, but she's just like holding my hand, but obviously freaking out. And we talked about it after this. And then they're like hooking me up to like the monitors, like the EKG monitors, blood pressure, like different thing, I don't even know what. And they checked all my vitals, and like the vitals were unstable, I think, at the moment. I can't even remember, but I remember like them saying something about like my blood pressure was high, my heart rate was high, da 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 da. But it was all trauma. It was all like, of course it is, because you're terrified because you just got hit by a car. And then I spent like the next few hours in the hospital. They did a CAT scan. They did a couple like images of my brain to make sure I didn't have a brain bleed. They did images of my legs. They did images of my back. They did a couple more tests, blood tests, urine tests, all kinds of things. Luckily, and by the grace of God, that's why I say it was a near-death experience, but it's also a miracle. I was not injured. Like I was not seriously injured. The cops came and they told me, the doctors and the cops all say that they don't understand how I survived the accident, because she was going at a really high speed where I got hit. And then they were saying that basically the car was totaled, the windshield was totaled, and somehow I had no injuries to my brain, which is what hit the windshield. And the only thing I had of my head was like bumps from hitting the windshield, but I didn't have a concussion. I didn't have brain bleed, injury to my head, nothing. So I'll go through the full injuries, but they're all very, very minor, especially when you look at what happened, and they're all superficial things. And like it was definitely a miracle, and I was definitely being protected by, like I said, loads of angels, God, and probably, I'm gonna say my aunt, because I felt her presence. So the injuries were that, I don't know if this happened when, I don't know how this part happened with my hands, but I think it was like when I landed, I must have like skid on the pavement a little bit and landed on my hands, because all the skin on my hands was off and they had to like bandage it. I said I had a pretty substantial bruise on the right side of my shoulder area, and that still will pain. Like there was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't broken or anything. It was just a bad bruise, but it does still hurt, like if it rains or something. And then I had a pretty bad bruise on my left, or was it my right? I think it was my left, like shin area. It was a big bruise there. And I had a couple bumps and bruises like throughout my body. My left foot was pretty bruised up from some part of the accident. And like I said, bumps, kind of bruises on like my head. But other than that, it was just bumps and bruises. So I spent a few more hours, I don't know how many hours, in the hospital. And they did a lot of blood work, a lot of tests. And they basically just said, listen, your body's in shock. But you're coming down from it. You have a lot of superficial injuries. We don't understand how you're not more severely injured, but you know, thank God you're not. The doctors used words like miracle. And I didn't even spend the night in the hospital. I was cleared to go home, and I went home probably in the middle of the night. Like it was probably like, this happened around like, I want to say like 4:45 p.m. and I left the hospital around 2 a.m. So after all the tests and everything, they said, we're gonna discharge you and you just need to rest. And I went home. I did not sleep that night. I actually kept kind of reliving the accidents. And then this is the part like that I actually love about this, was like the next day my friends were so supportive, my family was so supportive, everybody kind of came over, was there for me. You know, obviously they knew what happened, they knew how bad it could have been, and they wanted to see me, they wanted to be there for me. And I just really love that everyone was there and showed that like they really cared when something actually happened. And yeah, and then so that's why I said that I had trauma from it, but I've worked through it. And I wanted to also do this video because there's certain times I feel like in my life where I think very differently than people, and where maybe I'm more of a risk taker, or maybe I think more like I think sometimes I think more like everyone says, like, life is not promised tomorrow, all of those things, but I think I actually live that way a little bit more than most people my age, because people like to ignore death and things like that. And because I've had like a near-death experience, and because of other experiences in my life too, but specifically this one was definitely a turning point to where after this happened, I was no longer afraid to take risk. So even though this was a terrible thing to happen, I thank God that it was a miracle that he protected me, and that, you know, the angels, whoever was there that day, protected me. Someone protected me. And but I also see it as a huge turning point in my life, because it completely changed the way I went about things. So before the accident, I was like afraid to even date or open up to anybody or things like that. And like after the accident, I was not afraid to chase my, like, and there was a part of me that was afraid to chase certain dreams that I had and things like that. And after the accident, I was not afraid, and I will chase any dream and pretty much seize the day almost more than I used to before. And it's not all the accident, it's probably age too, but definitely the accident had a lot to do with changing my mindset with that and making me more of a risk taker, more of a you're alive so you're gonna do it type of person. And I think that had that accident not happened, I don't know if I would have taken the risk with Sam and have the life I have today. And it's just crazy that we literally met the semester after this happened. It's just crazy. And even though we were friends for like a while before we actually dated, it's just crazy that I had that experience literally, I want to say, like, this happened in December, and then we had the whole January off of college. And then I want to say I met him around like maybe end of February or beginning of March. But yeah, guys, that's my crazy near-death experience, car accident story. I wanted to share it to kind of clear up what I had said in the questions, but also to share it to let you guys know that to share a story time. But also, if anybody else is going through like a near-death experience or trauma, you can get through it. Talk to someone, talk about it. That really helps. And yeah, that's the story. So you guys know now, and that's what I was talking about that day. So I'll see you guys.